Welcome back to another MOTOBOB video where we're rounding up the best new bikes for 2022, and today it's the turn of the adventure bikes. Now we'll go in price order ascending, and this one does get a little spendy, and if you watch all the way through, I'd love to know from you at the end which one would be your pick. Now before we get started, a quick thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring this video, more about them later. Now first up at just over $6,000 we've got the Honda CB500X. Now I actually had one of these from Honda a couple of weeks ago. I haven't got around to editing the video, but as a little preview to that review, I thought it was absolutely excellent. It's got a peppy little engine, the parallel twin, and it's super economical. The brakes have been upgraded for this year, so you now get twin discs, so the braking is just as good as a lot of more expensive, bigger bikes. You also get a new Showa upside down fork for the new model year, and it looks very purposeful. You know, it makes the front end look a bit more butch, but also the ride it's right in that sweet spot of comfortable but accurate. It's comfy, it'll do motorway speeds, it's got a big 17.7 litre tank, and it sips fuel, so there's absolutely loads to like about it. Now for balance, you could argue there's not a lot in the way of tech, but at this price point for this sort of bike, I don't think it's really that important. All round, I think it's just a great bike, and I think it also looks very nice, especially in this pearl organic green finish. So yeah, a great option if you're looking for your first adventure bike and you want something that's not too big or intimidating, but also there is plenty of fun to be had for the more experienced rider, and it'd make a great little commuter. Now for another 1500 quid you could step up to a 650, the KAWASAKI VERSYS 650 to be precise. You know, it does have some similarities with the Honda. It's primarily road focused and it has a parallel twin engine with the 180 crank, but it just has a bit more presence and more of that big bike feel. Now it's by no means the most powerful or most exciting bike in the segment, but it's got a good following for being super reliable and good value for money. It's just one of those bikes that gets the job done. For 2022 it's much the same, so 66 horsepower, the chassis is pretty much unchanged, but you do now get a redesigned fairing and windscreen that visually pulls it in line with the other VERSYS models. You also get a TFT dash with phone connectivity and now 2-mode switchable traction control. So some neat updates to keep it competitive, and they did really need to do that because there's a new player in this market, and that's the Triumph Tiger Sport 660. Now admittedly we're starting to play a little fast and loose with the term adventure bike. This is more of a tall sports tourer, but Triumph have it in their adventure category on their website, and so it's in this list and you're just gonna have to make your peace with it. Either way, let's not get distracted from the fact that it is a brilliant motorcycle. You know, it takes the super popular Trident platform and jacks it up a bit, slaps on a fairing, bulks out the subframe to carry a passenger and luggage, and hey presto, you've got yourself a much more versatile bike. Now I was actually lucky enough to ride the prototype version in the summer, and of course I was already pretty familiar with the Trident, but that extra bit of wind protection from the fairing, the extra room you've got with the riding position, and the extra fuel capacity, it really transforms it into something that feels quite different, but also, you know, much more long-range capability. Now set against the competition, so the VERSYS 650 and the Tracer 7, it's more powerful, it's got more techie features, and you get Triumph's signature handling and attention to detail on the finish, but it is more expensive. I mean, you can't have it all. Now here's a couple of bikes that I don't have a price for yet. They're still at the sort of like late concept stage, but I'd expect more details this model year. The first one being the MV AGUSTA 5.5. So this is their new small to mid capacity adventure bike, and it's heavily based upon the BeNELLI TRK 502, so same engine and frame design, and both bikes will be produced by the Chinese manufacturer KAWASAKI. This one will be in the sort of 40 odd horsepower range, and in many ways quite similar to the CB500X, but MV AGUSTA is a bit more of an aspirational brand and a bit more premium, and so you'll get more premium components. So decent KYB fully adjustable suspension, Brembo radially mounted brakes on 320mm discs, and more tech, so like a 5-inch TFT display with phone connectivity for turn-by-turn nav. Now somewhat related, we just talked about the BeNELLI TRK 502, which the MV shares its engine and chassis with, but we've also got the new TRK 800 from BeNELLI, and this one looks pretty interesting as well. So again, built by KAWASAKI, but with the extra capacity you've got more power, so 76 horsepower peak, and that's starting to get competitive with the middleweights like the Yamaha Tenere 700. And the rest of it looks pretty good, so adjustable suspension courtesy of Marzocchi. This one gets Brembo brakes as well on big 320mm discs. a 7-inch TFT display, and all in a package that I think looks pretty smart. Now, I'd probably have written off BeNELLI bikes as a heritage brand on essentially a Chinese bike, but this one's got my interest a bit. Now, I just mentioned the Tenere 700, widely regarded as one of the best middleweight adventure bikes, if not the best, certainly in terms of off-road ability. So why mess with a winning formula? They haven't. This year, they've just given the standard bike and the 11 grand rally version a fresh lick of paint, and that's pretty much it. But the thing is, it's a basic bike, and the fundamentals of it, so the CP2 engine and the chassis design, those are the things that make it great, not having loads of tech. In fact, it's barely got any, just ABS. So there's not really any need to keep making like little incremental techie tweaks to keep up with the market. It's just a simple bike. Still probably the best bike to start with if you're thinking about buying a middleweight adventure, just in terms of most capability at the lowest price. Demo this one first. There is, however, a new kid on the block, and that's the Aprilia Touareg 660. It does a lot of the same stuff, and mechanically they're very similar. So a 270-degree parallel twin engine makes a little bit more power, but not much. Similar suspension, similar brakes, similar wheels, slightly off-road focused, and similar in stature as well. But where they really differ is the tech. So like I say, the Tenere is proper bare bones, but the Aprilia gets a TFT dash. It gets like 4 levels of traction control, 3 levels of engine braking, 3 levels of engine maps, and then various ABS settings. There's phone connectivity as well, and that opens up turn-by-turn nav on the screen. But perhaps most importantly for me, a simple feature, but the fact that it has a ride-by-wire throttle means that they can implement cruise control, whereas the Tenere, I think it's still a cable throttle, so they can't do cruise control. Now, it is about $1,000 more expensive than the Yamaha, but that's the beauty of the situation. Some people don't want any tech, they just want the best mechanical components at the lowest possible price, and so in that case, just go for the Tenere. If, however, it feels a little basic and you're willing to pay that little bit extra, obviously, go for the Aprilia. Now, it's a decent step up to the next one, and that's the NORDEN 901 from HUSQVARNA. It ought to make for a cracking bike. It's heavily based upon the 890 Adventure from KTM, over 100 horsepower from the parallel twin, and brilliant handling, be that on-road or off. And a big part of that is down to the fuel tank that hangs down either side quite low and keeps the center of gravity super low. It really removes that top heaviness that you can get from some adventure bikes, especially when they're fully fueled. But for me, the KTM's not exactly a looker, so hopefully the NORDEN delivers pretty much the same riding experience, but just in a much more aesthetically pleasing package. So yeah, this one's in my top 5, maybe even top 3 bikes that I'm looking forward to testing this year. Now, as I said at the top, a massive thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. If you've never used a VPN service before, then effectively it allows you to protect your connection and privacy whilst you're using the internet. Not only does it provide additional encryption to make sure no one else can see what you're doing, but it also anonymizes your browsing so big companies can't track you around the web. And on top of that, it also filters out malicious traffic to ensure that websites aren't loading harmful stuff in the background that'll damage your computer. Not only that, but you can connect to their servers all around the world, so you can access regionally locked content. That means more shows on your favorite streaming services, and you can access regionally locked websites as well. I've been using it plenty since we partnered up a few months back, and it's super fast, super reliable, easily good enough to stream video from around the world. And look, we've got a great promotional offer for you, so a huge discount on their 2-year deal, plus a month free to get you started. There's a link in the description, or you can just use the code MOTOBOB. Alright, so back to the bikes, and at just 150 quid more than the HUSQVARNA, we've got the Ducati MULTISTRADA V2. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking that it's a brand new model, but it's actually just a rebranded 950 MULTISTRADA to pull the name in line with the Panigale V2 and the new Street Fighter V2. There are a couple of minor tweaks though. There's a lower seat height, it's narrower in the seat as well to make the whole thing more accessible for shorter riders. The weights come down a bit too, a few refinements to the transmission, but it was already a good bike and they've pretty much stuck with the rest of it, as well as the upspec S version with the semi-active suspension and a few electronic extras. Next up, we've got the Africa Twin, a cracking adventure bike, be that in the more off-road focused standard model or the more touring-friendly adventure sports. Both bikes are available with a manual gearbox or their dual clutch transmission, which effectively acts like an automatic, and there's no other bike in the list that can match that feature. No big updates for this year. There's a couple of minor technical tweaks, but the main thing is the paint jobs. It gets a bigger Africa Twin logo, which I think does look pretty good, especially the tricolor standard bike or the super stealthy blacked out Adventure Sports. But perhaps the best looking new adventure bike of the bunch is the Ducati Desert X. It takes the MULTISTRADA V2 platform, so the same 937cc L-twin that makes 110 horsepower, a lot of the same tech, similar frame, but it adapts it for a bit more off-road capability, so taller suspension and off-road wheels and tires. It gets a little more protection with the sump guard. You've got a rally-inspired, vertically orientated TFT dash. And then also an extra fuel tank. It's already 20 litres, I think, the main tank, but you can get this accessory pod at the rear that goes under the seat, and it's another 8 litres. So when the main tank gets like half empty, you can pump in the fuel from the rear tank using a button on the switchgear. Such a cool feature, and obviously gives it loads of range. But yeah, I reckon it's the semi-retro Cagiva elephant inspired looks that are really going to capture the attention of many potential buyers. And rightfully so. It's a great looking bike, a little bit on the expensive side for the spec that you get in. If you compare it to other bikes at a similar price point, you can get more standard fit features, but I can't really resent anyone for paying a little bit extra for something that looks that special. Special, but not necessarily unique, because we've got another Cagiva elephant inspired bike that's just been announced, and that's the MV AGUSTA 9.5. So this is the bigger sibling to the 5.5 we talked about earlier, but it's not produced by BeMoto. This is their own thing, their proper premium adventure bike offering. So it'll use their triple cylinder engine, which is relatively unusual for the adventure bike market, only the Triumph Tiger before it. But yeah, it makes sense from an efficiency perspective because it'll be derived from the triple in all their other bikes. Not all of them, but most of them. And given that it's their first proper stab at an adventure bike, it looks pretty decent. The specs, the dimensions, they all look competitive. Good braking and suspension, good technology. I mean, their road bikes are top notch, all the latest stuff, and it all gets carried over. And so yeah, it really depends whether it's competitive on the price. Not being announced yet, but MVs do tend to be a bit on the premium side. Hopefully they can compete at least with the Ducati. One feature that really caught my eye with this bike on the press release, and it hasn't been talked about that much so far, is the fact that it'll be offered with an electronically actuated gearbox. So I assume that means you'll be able to use buttons on the switchgear to go up and down the gears rather than using foot control. Similar, I guess, to the Africa Twin DCT. When you put it in manual mode, you go plus and minus to go up and down the gears on the left switchgear. Very interesting design choice, not something you see a lot of in this market, and so definitely looking forward to finding out more details when they emerge this year. Now we're getting into the proper big bikes, and the Tiger 1200, the previous gen, was a proper big bike. Super heavy, and Triumph knew it, so they put the new one on a big diet, and in some specs, they've managed to shave off about 25 kilograms, which is just loads. Obviously, the BMW R1250 GS is the benchmark in this category and the bestseller by a long stretch, and they've even managed to undercut the weight of that. Peak power's up to 150 PS. It gets the T-plane crank from the Tiger 900 for a more torquey feeling character. Wheel sizes are more off-road focused now. There's a new dual-sided swing arm, which they say is stronger and lighter. Both the road-focused GT version and the more off-road focused rally version come as standard with a 20-litre tank, but the top-level Explorer models of each come with a 30-litre tank to compete directly with the GS Adventure. There's keyless ignition, including the filler cap and the steering lock, a new 7-inch TFT display, a rear-facing radar for blind spot warnings, and so it really is a big leap forward for this line of bikes. Obviously, I cannot wait to get my hands on one and see if it really is as good as the GS as Triumph are claiming. Last up and top of the pile in terms of price, it's the Ducati MULTISTRADA V4 Pikes Peak. Now, is this really an adventure bike? Well, yes and no. The yes is that it's based upon the MULTISTRADA V4, which obviously that's an adventure bike. But the no is the, they've done away with the slightly bigger wheel sizes. They've given it 17 inches for more handling bias and road bias. Road-focused tires, and they're Marcassini forged aluminium wheels as well, so they're proper lightweight. They ditched the dual-sided swing arm for a single-sided swing arm. Gives it a more racy look. They've steepened up the geometry at the front to give it quicker handling. Plenty of carbon on the bodywork and its own flashy paint job. And that's all on top of the good stuff that you get with the MULTISTRADA V4S. So 170 horsepower, semi-active Öhlins suspension, top-notch Brembo brakes, loads of tech, and front and rear facing radars for not only the blind spot warnings like the Tiger, but also adaptive cruise control. Safe to say that'll be a heck of a bike, but it is a heck of a price. So that's the new and updated bikes for this year. There are still plenty of bikes that you should consider that haven't been refreshed for 2022. So in the middleweight sector, the Tiger 900 range, the KTM 890 Adventure, the BMW F850 GS, and then in the heavyweight or large capacity sector, obviously the BMW R1250 GS and also the KTM 1290 Adventure. Those would be the ones that I check out, as well as Multi V4 Tiger 1200 when it comes out. As always, I'd love to know which one would be your pick down in the comments below. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one.